Thriving Through the Decade of Disruption. This is a series that we've been instigated at the University of Queensland Business School, largely as a suite of activities we're trying to do to help not only our students, our MBA students and our UQ alum, but also the broader business community. And we've been really encouraged by the response we've had, largely because what we know is that in this time of sort of crisis is we get new opportunities emerge and new threats come along. And entrepreneurship, which is a focus that we have at the University of Queensland and innovation, is really that ability to be able to see these challenges, see these threats, and almost look through them into the opportunity. And so what we've been doing every week is talking to different entrepreneurs and investors, and even corporate leaders, to understand how are they going about trying to embrace this opportunity, recognizing that there's going to be catastrophe and some companies are going to be swallowed up by the crisis, but really trying to unpack what are the key elements that you need to have in preparation to be able to really exploit this crisis that we're going through, and knowing that we're going to have this massive disruption event. We know that that's going to probably filter through for a few years, and what that does is it just turns up the temperature on the challenges that all businesses are going to face. And so, but that also accelerates potentially, and I think we'll hear a great story from Tony and Rezap today around how some of this change in temperature can actually boost a certain company if you've got the right elements. And so really glad today to have Dr. Tony Keating. Tony and I worked together at the University of Queensland a number of years ago, and Tony's going to take us on a great journey of a story around a really game-changing transformational technology that's come out of University of Queensland, and really is starting to have, and I think will have a profound impact on the healthcare industry. And I think we've got some really good lessons to learn from the way that Tony and the team have been able to go about taking this technology to market. So Tony, thanks for coming and joining us. I might just throw to you straight up and just tell us a little bit about Rezap, because it's still a small company, but with big potential. Tell us a little bit about Rezap and where it started and where you've got to now.
Well, thanks, Cameron. Thanks for inviting me on to present. Glad to have the opportunity to present back to UQ. As you said, I was working at UniQuest with yourself and a number of other people at UniQuest, and our role at UniQuest was to take technologies out of the University of Queensland, incubate them, and then eventually see them fly. And that's really been the story of Rezap. Rezap started from an idea from a professor at the University of Queensland, Professor Adantha Abaratney, who had this idea that cough sounds contained information about what was going on inside the lungs. Pretty wild idea at the time, and I'm sure there are a number of people who didn't believe him that it would actually work. But he took a chance. He put together a submission to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation provided him with the initial funding for the work. And that work was, could he diagnose pneumonia, which is the biggest killer of children under 5 in the developing world, using just a cough sound. So Adantha got together a team with that funding. He sent a poor postdoc up to Indonesia to record some cough sounds of patients, brought that data back to UQ, worked his magic, and lo and behold, yes, this crazy idea of would cough sounds contain information that tells us if you have pneumonia or not, it worked. And so, this was something that UniQuest was really interested in at the time. We obviously saw huge potential beyond the philanthropic activities of the Gates Foundation. But at that time, this was, I would say, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less than 10 years ago. There were some challenges here taking this product to market. And one of those challenges was building a medical device is an expensive, risky and long time horizon activity, building a customized medical device. And the other one is, even once you've built it, how do you actually get this out into people's hands? And that's a challenge. About 5 years ago, after working with Adantha for a long time, we realized that there was this really unique opportunity around timing. So 5 years ago, we all started to have iPhones in our pockets. And 5 years ago, we all decided we could then, because we had iPhones in our pockets, we could deliver a medical device using these algorithms with those iPhones. Effectively, the technology, the consumer technology in an iPhone was good enough to do what we were doing with specialist technology previously. So that gave us a huge benefit in getting to market quickly. We didn't have to go and build a medical device. We didn't have to sell a medical device. It was just software. The other big thing that occurred, and this I think is a challenge, especially in the healthcare space, is how do you get, and I mean, it's even a challenge in the consumer product space, how do you get a new fancy product into the hands of consumers? How do you get them aware of what you're building? And, we initially looked at this thinking, well, we're going to have to advertise and sell directly to individuals. And that's going to cost a lot of money. And again, a lot of money, a lot of risk, a lot of long lead time, hard to do. But 5 years ago, there was this boom in telehealth. And that gave us this B2C option. We could partner with telehealth providers and provide them with a diagnostic test. We could effectively use B2B, B2B to the telehealth provider, and then B2C by the telehealth provider to their customers. So, a few deals could get us access to millions of patients, which is a real shortcut getting into market. So the last 5 years we've spent building clinical studies, running clinical studies, getting all the validation data that we need to do this, getting the regulatory approvals. And right now we're in the stage of having multiple deals with telehealth providers and rolling out the product over the next month.
Yeah, look, that's such a cool story, and really is, a technology that can be quite transformational. But Tony, as well as I do that universities and researchers and inventors have got lots of cool ideas, and in reality, most of those ideas don't ever escape, the place where the idea came from. So tell us a little bit about that. What was the key point or the key sort of thing that happened to be able to take that idea? Because you'd obviously been working with Udantha for a number of years. The timing thing came along where the processing had happened. But how did you actually get to forming ResApp? I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, so, as with most technologies, you talk to 100 people, thousands of people about what you're doing. And so at that point, as I said, we thought the timing was right. We thought there was this great opportunity around timing to bring this product to market, but we needed help, as you do. You need some cash, you need people. And I met with a clinician based in Perth, Dr. Paul Porter, who was a pediatrician who was very interested in this space. And he effectively worked with Udantha and myself to then bring this company to fruition. And so we took a little bit of an unusual approach. We weren't a traditional venture capital backed company. We took some angel seed funding, and then we started talking to different people about the best way to finance, the development of the company, which included clinical trials, etc. So, we ended up with what's called a reverse takeover. Effectively a public listing of the company at the very early days. At this point in time, 5 years ago, venture capital in Australia was, it was still very, I would say, small market. And, we fell through the cracks. So there's a lot of venture capital around market risk, which is what I sort of call technology companies, where it's really, there's very little hard science, technical science. It's really about, will this idea stick in the market? And then you have the life science investors who are all about, not really about market risk, but about science risk. And we have a little bit of both in ResApp. But we also had, as you said, a very powerful story, a very powerful idea, a very easily understandable idea to really improve healthcare. And so it was something that as a public company, we've been able to really raise money on. And we've been able to take through the process of, I think we've raised nearly $25 million to date. We've run multiple clinical studies. We've got regulatory approvals. Something we obviously could never have done by ourselves, and we needed access to that capital to do what we've done.
Yeah, look, and you're right. That isn't an overly common story, and so I'm interested in, and I'm sure a number of people watching either now or going to watch the webinar later, interested in just your perspectives, because I mean, running an ASX listed company from ground zero, that sounds. I've run a few companies. That sounds like a big job and terrifying, really. Tell us about some of the pros and cons of what that journey's been like over 5 years of you launching into a new company as an ASX listed company.
Yeah, look, I mean, being ASX listed means a lot of responsibilities to a vast number of shareholders, and that means that we have disclosure requirements, we have regulatory requirements. We have audited books. There is a substantial overhead associated with that. The access to capital is obviously a big positive. We're able to go out and raise money from institutional or high net worth investors relatively easily, as we've demonstrated, as long as you hit the milestones that you also publicly have to announce and publicly try to move forward. So, you are judged on the day-to-day motion of your share price, rightly or wrongly. But in my mind, it's all about generating that long-term value for the company and looking at those value points as you would in a private company. We know that in 2 months' time, we need to have launched our product in telehealth, and so we are doing everything we can to hit that milestone. So look, I think being a public company has obviously benefits. It's got, we have to share probably more information than I would like to share publicly that competitors or partners can see about deals that we've done or deals that we're doing. But in general, it actually gives us a lot of credibility when talking to large companies overseas. If we're able to say, we're an ASX listed company, we have audited financials, we have disclosure obligations. You don't have to sign an NDA to see our annual report. Our annual report is on our website. You can download it and see everything about our business. Those things help us a lot and get us across and open doors. Obviously, once the doors are open, there's still a lot of discussion to be had, but they definitely open doors. It gives us a level of credibility.
Yeah, and so one thing you've raised, which is really interesting, is this idea of disclosing more information what you'd like to, particularly in relation to competitors. And when I talk to entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you do as well, quite often they want to have a quiet conversation and tell you about their idea under an NDA, or they really don't want to tell too many people about it because they're really worried that someone's going to take that idea and they're going to lose their opportunity. Talk to us a little bit about, because you are in that environment where you've disclosed pretty well everything. I mean, what you're doing is amazing and it's innovative, but it's probably, I suspect, something that someone else could reverse engineer. So tell me about how you're dealing with it, and what are you seeing in that competitive landscape now that you're getting traction? Are you seeing some evidence that other people are coming into there, and how do you respond to that as a listed company?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know that startups are about execution as well as the idea, and potentially execution is even bigger than the idea in many cases. So being able to execute, being able to build a team who are able to push these products forward is really important to us. So we've spent a long time building a really strong team in Brisbane who are able to do our software development, do our algorithm development, do our regulatory, do our business development, all of that. It's really important that we put those processes and team in place to execute. And so, I think that's in general across the board. It's, yes, you can have a great idea, but executing on that idea and bringing it forward is really important. If we look at competitors for ResApp today, there are starting to become competitors in our rearview mirror. We definitely start to see, shoots of people who are having similar ideas than what we are having. Again, I think, the approach that we've taken to, really build, I guess, a team and the knowledge in the company means that we're in a really strong position to compete. I mean, effectively, we've had 5 years of people knowing what we're doing, but not really trying to follow us. So we've got really an inbuilt institutional knowledge now of how to compete in this space. We've obviously got patents, we've got data, we've got proprietary things as well. But to me, it's, I have a really strong team that I really believe can compete really well and can bring the product, to market and generate revenue.
Yeah, and look, that's great. And I think one of the things that's really interesting for me is this idea of getting to market first, but also having some sort of sustainable competitive advantage. And I often talk about the story of 24-hour gyms. When the first Jets gym and 24-hour gyms came out, this was a transformational thought, and all of a sudden they exploded. And I know I had friends who were buying franchises and they were going crazy. But in reality, there was really no sustainable competitive advantage. And so really other people came in within 6 months because it was a growing fast market. And then traditional gyms just decided to put a swipe on the front of their door. And all of a sudden they'd lost that competitive advantage, and the market sort of just went down to more of a commodity. So what I love about your story is, and I guess those stories where there is some sort of innovation element to that competitive advantage, it becomes harder to replicate. And particularly in your space, in the health space, the data that you have is not something, and I know you guys have spent years creating the data of, does it work? I mean, it's not just sort of a flash in the pan. It's something that actually works or it doesn't work. And so that data is going to be really hard to replicate, I assume, from someone else. Yeah,
and it's important to keep innovating as well. And I think our sleep product is one example of that. We have other products that we're innovating on, is taking that initial idea and developing it further and filing more patents and having more ideas and generally improving. I mean, the day and age that we're in, we're not in a position where you can take a piece of idea, a piece of IP, freeze it, take it to market, and hope no one's ever going to build something better. For us, we have a continual approach to that innovation, continually trying to improve on what we've done. Sleep is one example. We're also, working in other examples like, chronic disease management, where we're building algorithms again to do, listen to audio, manage disease, built on the existing work, but very innovative in their approach. So it's a real good mix between executing on your existing IP, but also generating new IP and continually to innovate, because otherwise someone will innovate past you very quickly.
Yeah. Before I go on, I forgot to mention at the start that if you've got any questions for Tony, there's a Q&A box down the bottom. So please feel free to drop that question in, and when we get towards the end, we'll be able to ask those questions of Tony. But Tony, that point around continuous innovation, tell us about how you go about doing that, because I think I understand that Udantha is still part of the business, but also still part of the university. So is that work done entirely internally within the company, or are you partnering with other institutions to do some of that innovation?
So it's been a combination over time. I'll say most of it's now being done internally in the company. But we're also, having discussions with UQ and still doing some work with Udantha and the team at UQ. But in general, we have brought a lot of that innovation in-house now. We have a team that are dedicated to algorithm development, and they look at all sorts of, ideas that we have. Again, it is a balance between that execution and the commercial aspects of that. We don't have the flexibility that, a partnership with UQ, a research agreement with UQ may have about looking at something that's, 3, 4, 5, 10 years off. We're very focused about, what can we deliver in the next quarter? What can we then deliver in the next year? So it's a very different focus of innovation generation, much more while we would partner and work with other people around the longer term blue sky type work. Yeah.
So you've obviously got the Res app product, and maybe you can just unpack a little bit about how that works and how you're rolling that out in terms of this relationship with telehealth. And because when we initially started looking at this, I know when we were at UniQuest together, it just seemed obvious that every mum and dad in America would want to have this, so they could just see if their kid was sick, they could work out whether to cuddle them or take them to hospital. That seemed obvious, but you haven't gone down that pathway. What were the main drivers behind that, and how is it actually going to work now? I think you've got some commercial trials. How are those trials actually working?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess ResApp DX, which is our diagnostic product, DX being diagnosis in clinical speak. So ResApp DX is a tool for acute diagnosis of respiratory disease. So essentially you provide 5 coughs. The tool analyzes those 5 coughs and provides a differential diagnosis of diseases like pneumonia, asthma, COPD, bronchiolitis in children, croup in children. So it's a fairly technical product. And the reason for that being is that we're positioning it as an aid to diagnosis for a clinician. So it's really for a clinician to use rather than a mum and dad at home. But the secret here is that we really want a mum at home to be able to use it while still keeping the input from the clinician. And that's where telehealth comes in. So for us, telehealth allows us to build a product that provides value to a clinician, but also provides value to that mum at home who's at 11 o'clock at night, doesn't know whether to take their child to the emergency room or not. So our focus here is we partner with those telehealth providers. We embed effectively our technology inside their platform. And we provide that clinician who is trying to understand what's wrong with the patient over a video call like this, a tool to accurately assess the patient remotely. So the mum can ask the child to cough a few times, and then the clinician at the other end gets a report that says this child has croup. These are the things that you should do. So it's about providing that easier route to market. If we went direct to consumer, and we are exploring that activity, that sort of product right now, there are a number of challenges there, right? So how do consumers react, for example, when you tell them that their child has pneumonia? Without a doctor being involved, that's a dangerous position to be in. So having the doctor involved in the loop is really important. And then telehealth gives us both the ability to have the doctor in the loop, but it also gives us a route to market. And I think commercialization wise, that's really important because we partner with those telehealth providers who already have the 10,000 or the million mums at the other end of the telehealth consultation. So we're not selling directly to those consumers. We're effectively selling to the telehealth providers, and they're on-selling to their existing customer base.
Yeah, and I think that's such a sound strategy, largely because the market risk is enormous, particularly if you've got a consumer product. I mean, most products, they probably work. Most apps work. I'm sure they do what they say they're going to do, but to try and get the number of people to use it and pay the 50 cents or the $1 or the $10 or the nothing and try and make the money off of advertising, that's where most things fail. And so being able to find partners, strategic partners who can help you take that product to market, that's obviously really critical. And so do you ever foresee a time where it might be available, to people at home on their phone?
Yeah, look, we're investigating that. We're working with a number of, I guess, big multinationals at the moment and talking to them about how to do this. Again, we're looking at the strategy of how do we get, there's a couple of challenges here. One, as you say, we don't really want to have to buy Super Bowl ads to try to sell this product to individuals. That is a really big risk spend. So can we find partners who already have that sales and marketing and consumer reach to be able to then work with them to use that existing reach to get it into the market? So we're talking to a number of multinationals about that opportunity. And then we have to okay, well, what happens if you give a child a diagnosis of pneumonia? So how do we deal with that messaging? And so we have to work really closely with experts on how do you message medical diseases and medical conditions to a consumer so effectively they don't freak out, that they understand what the next steps are and then can take control. And so, they're the two issues, and both of those we're working with different people to try to help us as a small company enter what is a ginormous market, but with ginormous risks as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that whole journey that you're on is there's so much we can learn from, because quite often, and I think the bit in startups that people underestimate or underdo is partnering. How do we partner with people that help us get to where we want to go? They think you've got to do it all. You've got to keep all of the value. And I think what you've, I guess, experienced is that by leaving a whole heap of value, passing that on to someone else, but you also take enormous risk and enormous amount of capital off the table you don't need to raise. And so then it reduces risk, it reduces some of the reward, but obviously the net outcome is probably a lot better. But maybe tell us a little bit about, because I think the B2C product, the sleep apnea product, that sounds tremendously exciting. Tell us a little bit about how that's come about and where that's at.
Yeah, so the sleep check product, so we've been interested in sleep apnea for a long time. And we had the internal team look at some of our algorithms could we repurpose them to diagnose sleep apnea or screen for sleep apnea? And so again, it started actually with a discussion with a clinician. So we met with a clinician, Dr. Curry, who's based in Perth, who really provided us access to an important data set of people sleeping, sounds of people sleeping, and their clinical sleep apnea diagnosis. So we took that relatively large data set, pushed it through our algorithm development team, and came up with some really innovative solutions. Now, there's other work published globally around sleep apnea diagnosis, but we've come up with some really innovative solutions based on a lot of experience that we've had from cough analysis. And so we've used a lot of that, again, that continuous innovation to bubble up a new product. And now that product has gotten regulatory approval. We tested it in clinical trials. It got great results. We now have regulatory approval to ship that. And interestingly, in this product, we thought the best route to market here was direct to consumers. And we made that decision based on, this is not, sleep apnea is not something you would do in a telehealth consultation. It requires you to record your sleeping sounds overnight. And it just made a lot of sense to us that this is something that, with a small amount of advertising, could become a very, exciting consumer product. If you look at the top 5 apps on the App Store for health and fitness, sleep is one of the first and second products. So it's very, very front of mind. So you're not having to really dig out, people's latent need for, does my child have, at a particular point in time? This is really about, okay, there are a lot of people who are interested in their sleep. Even with COVID, people are worried that their sleep is affecting their ability to deal with diseases. And so there's a latent need, or there's even not even a latent need, it's a front of mind need that people are really concerned about their sleep. And Sleep Check, we think there's a really unique angle here in that it's not just about your sleep. Sleep apnea is actually a real disease. It's not just snoring. It's something that has a major effect on your health. And so that there's a slight difference in the acute ResApp DX to Sleep Check. And we think that slight difference means we can enter the market directly.
Yeah, cool. Now, have you had a lot of resistance from the medical professional about that? I would have thought maybe some doctors might think, well, you know, is this going to make me redundant? Is this going to replace me? What's been the medical professional response to this technology? And because I mean, this is the thin edge of the wedge, really, because technology is going to do more and more with AI and machine learning, more and more diagnosis. What's been the medical professionals' response to this?
So we've always worked really closely with the medical professionals, and we see it not as replacing them, but providing them with additional tools. So for ResApp DX, it's about providing them a tool they don't have today. So you can imagine in a telehealth consultation without a stethoscope, they're really making guesses and trying to understand what the patient is what's going on inside the patient's lungs by asking them questions. That's just not acceptable, really, to make a diagnosis. They need to understand what's going on inside the lungs. So for ResApp DX, it's all about, can we really supercharge the clinician and get them with the information that they need? With Sleep Check, we're taking an approach where it's a screening tool, and you really think about that as an educational tool. So the goal with Sleep Check is to get you, if you have a high risk of having sleep apnea, to go and engage with your GP, so that then your GP can take you through the process to get treated for sleep apnea. So it's really about the approach that we've taken, has been very inclusive of the clinical profession and trying to make sure that we are not trying to displace the existing pathways. We're trying to help clinicians pull patients through those pathways better.
Yeah, and again, a great example of partnering with stakeholders in the value chain rather than trying to totally disrupt them and exclude them. So I think that's a great strategy. Tony, just finally, so this started with a developing country context, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding. Tell us a little bit about what I talk often about with startups and with anything really is what is your why and who is your who. So can you tell us a little bit about where you think this is heading and what is the motivation that drives you as CEO of this company? You're pouring your heart and soul into this company, and is there likely to be an eventual benefit back to the developing economies and developing countries that will actually sort of fulfill that very early goal that the researchers had when they got this whole thing started?
Yeah, so let me cover the developing side first. We're really excited about those opportunities of giving back in the developing world. We have a number of open discussions with companies and agencies who operate in those locations. Hopefully we'll be able to share some of that soon. But yeah, we definitely see opportunities to help clinicians, help aid agencies, provide better healthcare services in those countries that lack healthcare services. And so, yeah, we're very excited about that. And that's, I think when I look at the staff in the company today, that's one of the reasons why many of those staff join. There's definitely a need or a want to give back and to be able to help that side of the world. And we can do that, right? We're software. We're able to, deliver solutions at relatively low cost. And so that's another really unique opportunity that we have. Long term, my goal, I think when I sat down with Udantha 10 years ago and talked about this technology, I think one of the things that we were wanting to know is, could audio really tell us about people's health? Is audio a really strong biomarker in pharma speak, but is it an indicator of someone's health? And I think over the last 10 years, we've really shown that yes, audio can give us a heap of information about what's going on inside the lungs, whether you've got sleep apnea or not, whether you've got COPD or not, whether you're having a pneumonia event, all of these things. And I think when you then take that to the next level and think that you have so many devices with you that are able to record audio, your phone, your watch, your Apple HomePod, your Alexa device, all of these things have a capability to bring audio in, to record audio. What would happen if we could empower those devices to understand what's going on inside your lungs and empower those devices to understand your health? Can we get to a situation where rather than you going to see a doctor, your Amazon Alexa tells you, hey, I've noticed you've been coughing a lot. It looks like those coughs are associated with pneumonia. You're heading towards pneumonia. You should see a doctor so we can cut this off early. That's my long-term vision. And I think that's really exciting.
That is profoundly exciting, Tony, and how thrilling to have a company like that that's offering that technology, really a world leader in that technology, out of little old Brisbane from what is an excellent University of Queensland. So that's tremendous. I'm just going to throw a couple of slides up. While anyone has got any questions, feel free to drop those questions in. So this is just a little note from our sponsors. So this is brought to you by the University of Queensland Business School. One thing I want to just talk about is what we're doing to try and help businesses. So we've got a micro masters in corporate innovation and a whole lot of other programs that are helping business people and not-for-profits really embrace the opportunities and the challenges. So you can see here on this link, there's a whole heap of courses in that are offered basically for about $8. You can do this course, and some of those courses can actually go towards getting you credit for a Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the University of Queensland. And also draw your attention to the UQ MBA, which is one of the top MBAs in Australia and in fact one of the top MBAs in the world. And there will be an information evening on the MBA. I teach the Entrepreneurship Capstone in the final year of both the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation and the MBA program in the Entrepreneurship Capstone and the Lean Startup Capstone. So we focus very much on using innovation to try and create or avert or avoid disruption for both corporates and startups. So if you're interested in doing an MBA, please have a look at the UQ MBA. Come along to one of our information nights, which are now all virtual. So Tony, that's been a fascinating conversation, and again, we've known each other for a long time, and it's just so exciting to see such a game-changing technology emanating out of the university, and we really appreciate you taking the time. So I've just got one. Let me just get one question here from Michael. Have you experienced difficulties moving your product forward as the government develops its software as a medical device legislation? I'm assuming you might know what that means.
Sure. Yeah. So the software as a medical device legislation is looking at, I guess, removing the gray areas around software being a medical device. So we've always actually taken the opinion that our software is a medical device, and we've gotten regulatory approvals for that. So from our perspective, something that provides a diagnosis to a clinician should be a medical device, and I think the government agrees with that, and our regulatory approvals have done that. So we've come from a medical device background. So for us, the software as a medical device regulations have really clarified, that we are doing the right thing, that we are taking our software and treating it as if it's a medical device. I think it's great also for innovators in the health and wellness space that may be developing software which is not providing diagnosis, which is not affecting treatment of patients. I think it's a great thing to actually show those or tighten up those lines so they know exactly where they're operating. Because that's always the challenge with regulations, is that there's often a lot of gray space, and then it becomes challenging to know what you can build and what you can't build. So for us, it hasn't changed things, but I can see it being very, very beneficial for the industry at large.
Yeah, and I guess in some ways that gives you that degree of protection, because it means that someone else can't just use the same Shazam sort of voice recognition technology and launch an app that try and diagnoses. It actually provides that barrier, which gives you a whole heap of protection, I guess, from anyone trying to do a rip-off or trying to do something that's suboptimal and destroying the actual category.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the role of the regulator as well, right? I mean, the regulator is there to make sure that products that are put into the market are tested and are valid and do what they say they do on the box. And that's the TGA's role here, and we're very happy to be working through the process and getting approvals for that exact thing. And as you say, it is definitely a competitive advantage, as we've set out from day one to do that.
Yeah, great. Look, Tony, I've taken up a lot of your time on a Friday. I so much appreciate this opportunity to chat and to share the ResApp story with our listeners. So it is an exciting story, and there are a whole heap of those stories coming out of Brisbane, out of University of Queensland in Australia. So that's a great story. Thanks for your time. For those of you that are watching, please feel free to join. Next week, I'm talking to Phil Moore, who's a partner in the venture capital company Main Sequence Ventures. They're commercialised a $200 million fund set up by the CSIRO to commercialise game-changing technologies. And Phil's going to be talking to us about a new company that's really only started in the last 12 months called V2 Foods, which has launched an alternative non-meat-based burger and a whole range of different meat products. So Phil's going to be talking to us about how venture capital is actually working with researchers to create consumer products, and it's a fascinating story. So look forward to seeing you, or you seeing us again. And again, thank you, Tony, for your time. It's been a great conversation.
Great. Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks, Tony. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.